Hey, everybody, welcome back to Insight Incorporated. We are continuing, as you might guess, because we're wearing the same exact clothes as last week, uh, recording the final installment of a two-part series on the Brothers Karamazov, and more specifically, the Grand Inquisitor passage in the middle, which is sort of the premier debate between nihilism and faith in God and faith in humanity. And so, with as little ado as possible, I will recommend that you go and listen to that conversation if you have not already, to gain much of the context for what we will be discussing here tonight, whenever it is that you're listening. And yeah, I guess to give it a little context, in case you are unwilling to comply with my request to go give us another view on our previous podcast, the brothers Karamazov are three brothers, and two of them are Ivan and Alyosha. They meet in a pub to have dinner and engage in a deep spiritual, philosophical, existential conversation about life, the value and meaning of it, suffering as a counterpoint to the value and meaning of life, and what to do about justifying that suffering. Ivan is the nihilist character, and Alyosha is the believer. He's a monk novitiate, and yeah, I think that pretty much gets you up to speed as far as the bare bones. And where we last left them off, Ivan has decimated any sense of possible hope in humanity, in life in general, and in the way that God seems to have set up the world. And he is about to make his crowning argument in the form of a poem, and it is fantastic in its nature, and it's a look at he kind of lays it out, so we'll hop right into it, unless James, you have anything to add to that intro.
I don't think so. If you hear,
Nice.
like you probably just heard now, if you hear a dog barking, very high pitched dog barking, it is my mom's really annoying toy poodle. So, yeah. So sorry in advance. Misery loves company, though. So
Yes, that poodle is one of the reasons why I entertain nihilism. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, it's like that. Was it the frenzied excitement over torture? Sometimes
yes.
I imagine.
I wish we had included that joke in last week's episode, because it was heavy, very heavy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Anyway, yes. Okay, sweet. Do you want to lay it out for us?
Why, sure. So got done with his argument concerning returning his ticket to God for, his ticket to harmony and the new kingdom. Ivan says he's going to return his ticket because he can't stand to even entertain such a pitiful, he doesn't say these words, but pitiful way to redeem all of human suffering, especially suffering of children. And then in that, he had just claimed that, is there anything in the world, is there in all the world a being that could forgive and have the right to forgive such suffering? And Alyosha says there is, and that is Jesus. And then Ivan says, no, I have not forgotten about Jesus. And so he said, I actually once composed a poem. I did it about a year ago. If you're able to waste another 10 minutes or so with me, which is probably more like an hour with Ivan, we are going to entertain the pieces of the poem. And he says, my poem is entitled The Grand Inquisitor, a preposterous thing, but I feel like telling it to you. And so in this is how he addresses Jesus in his worldview and surmisings of the church even. And so it's interesting that we talked about in the introduction last episode that Dostoyevsky sought to talk about children and sought to talk about the church. And this is kind of how he synthesizes it through Ivan, who is like using children to undermine the legitimacy of the church, but then even to go as far as to pretty much accuse the church of intense corruption, of actually worshiping Satan, which is quite a radical accusation on the surface. But yeah, so he envisions this in his fantasy, in his poem, that it is at the height of the Inquisition that took place during the 15th century, he said, I think. And it takes place in Spain, I believe. And there is this Grand Inquisitor, the one who is finding out the heretics, and he had just got done burning 100 heretics unto the glory of God just the day before. He says, my poem was set in Spain at the most dreadful period of the Inquisition, when bonfires glowed throughout the land every day to the glory of God. And he says, it is at this place, at this time, that Jesus decides to heed the cry for his people to come and visit them. And he says, no, this is not, of course, the coming in which he will appear according to his promise at the end of days in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, which will take place suddenly. No, he has conceived the desire to visit his children, at least for an instant, and precisely in those places where the bonfires of heretics had began to crackle. And his boundless mercy he passes once more among men, in that same human form in which for 3 years he walked among men 15 centuries earlier. He came down to the hot streets and squares of the southern town, in which only the previous day, in the presence of the king, the court of the knights, the cardinals, and the loveliest ladies of the court, in the presence of the numerous populations of all Seville, there have been burned by the Cardinal Grand Inquisitor very nearly a good 100 heretics, all in one go. Ad majorem gloriam Dei, unto the glory of God. That's what that Latin phrase means. And so Jesus, he makes a spectacle. He walks and he says that all recognize that this is Jesus, and he's healing people. He even raises a girl from the dead. And in that moment that this coffin with the girl is brought to him, and he gazes with compassion, his lips softly pronounce again, Talitha cum, damsel, I say unto you, arise. At this moment, the Grand Inquisitor himself comes. He is an old man of almost 90, tall and straight, with a withered face and sunken eyes, in which, however, there is still a fiery spark-like gleam. Oh, he is not dressed in his resplendent cardinal's attire, the attire in which yesterday he showed himself off before the people as the enemies of the Roman faith were being burned. No, at this moment he wears only his old, coarse, monkish cassock. He arrests Jesus before the crowd. Says he has seen it all, has seen the coffin being put down at his feet, has seen the damsel rise up, and a shadow has settled on his face. He extends his index finger and orders the guards to arrest him. And lo, such is his power, and so accustomed, submissive, and tremblingly obedient to him are the people that the crowd immediately parts before the guards, and they, amidst the sepulchre silence that has suddenly fallen, place their hands on him and march him away. Instantly, the crowd, almost as one man, bow their heads to the ground before the elder Inquisitor, and without uttering a word, he blesses the people and passes on his way. And so, anyways, he brings Jesus into captivity. And then he starts to question him. This is the interrogation of Jesus. He starts with, is it you? You. Receiving no answer, however, he quickly adds, no, do not reply. Keep silent. In any case, what could you possibly say? I know only too well what you would say, and you have no right to add anything to what was said by you in former times. Why have you come to get in our way? For you have come to get in our way, and you yourself know it. But do you know what will happen tomorrow? I do not know who you are, and I do not want to know. You may be he, or you may only be in his likeness. But tomorrow I shall find you guilty and burn you at the stake as the most wicked of heretics. And those same people who today kissed your feet will tomorrow at one wave of my hand rush to rake up the embers on your bonfire. Do you know that? Yes, I dare say you do, he added in heartful reflection, not for one moment removing his gaze from his captive. Um, so this is what starts off this poem of the Grand Inquisitor. It's this um, elder inquisitor who is highly revered, very authoritative, and he pretty much has a time to express his mind to Christ himself, and he's accusing Jesus of getting in the way of the church, uh, and so this is this is how this starts out.
Yeah. So to me, this is the imagistic encapsulation of Ivan's take on the church and their role of uh, synthetically alleviating the problem of suffering, but also uh, I think Ivan presents it in such a like a terrifying and compelling way that this is the way that would sort of exit humanity out of suffering, um, even if it's terribly unjust in the end. And so it's very interesting to see how he sets everything up here with the Inquisition being what draws Jesus to his people, and so his desire to set them free, which I would say is a good thing. Uh, Obviously, it's like I feel like it's like hard to talk because you have Dostoyevsky's Ivan in the room with us. I'm like careful of my words here because I could be eviscerated by the blistering intellect of Ivan. Um, and so this terrible time, terrible time in church history where the uh, the epitome of love and freedom, Jesus Christ, is used as the mascot of the authority of the church, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church to be specific. And they are steamrolling the opposition to their authority. And so you see pyres of people being lit on fire to the glory of God. And this is not the glory that Jesus speaks of in John 17, right? And so that phrase is used to evoke a sort of injustice that is emotionally evocative. Like you react to the phrase ad majorem gloriam Dei or whatever it is, and it's like you uh, you see the juxtaposition of God's glory and man's lascivious, abusive authority. And in that, I just wanted to call attention to the attire of the Grand Inquisitor himself, being that the day before, when he was performing his regular duties, he was wearing his decadent red cardinal robes uh, and displaying his sort of decadent authority. And then this evening, he approaches Christ, who is encountering his people, loving them, freeing them, healing them. And he comes in the holy attire of a monk. And so it's like the pinnacle of holiness is the removal of decadence and the submission to sort of the ascetic lifestyle of a monk in order to preserve what is good and holy. And this Grand Inquisitor who stands for all that is abusive and coercive, manipulative, oppressive about the church at this time approaches Christ in the holiest of attire. This is a symbol of what it is that man believes can be redemptive, confronting Jesus. who is the being who will redeem mankind. And so I just find that uh, beautiful, well done by Dostoevsky, setting up the depth of the depravity of the church at this time.
Mm. Yeah. And actually, I never thought of that. That was good. um. So, anyways, Jesus doesn't say a word during this whole entire encounter, and they kind of make a point. Alyosha asks him a question, and they kind of have like a little side conversation, and then they go back into the narrative. Um, this is actually interesting. The old man himself remarks to him that he has not the right to add anything to what he has already said to that has already been said by him in former times. If one cares to, one can see in that statement the most basic characteristic of Roman Catholicism, in my opinion at least. It's as if they were saying, it was all told by you to the Pope, and so it is now all of it in the Pope's possession. And now we should appreciate it if you would stay away altogether and refrain from interfering from the time being at any rate. That is a sense in which they not only speak about, but also write, the Jesuits at least. I've read such things in the works of their theologians, yada, yada. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he's being very bold-faced specific about what he's talking about there.
Yeah. So he says, you do have any right to come and add? No, you do not, lest you add anything to what has already been said by you, unless you take away from people the freedom you so stood up for when you were upon the earth. Anything new that you divulge will encroach upon people's freedom to believe, for it will look like a miracle, and their freedom to believe was what mattered to you most even back then, 1,500 years ago. Was it not you who so often used to say back then, I want to make you free? Well, but now you have. Now you have seen those free people, the old man suddenly adds with a thoughtful and ironic smile. Yes, this task has cost us dearly, he continues, looking at him sternly. But we have at last accomplished, in your name, we have accomplished it. For 15 centuries we have struggled with that freedom, but now it is all over, and over for good. You don't believe that it is over for good? You look at me meekly, and do not even consider me worthy of indignation. Well, I think you ought to be aware that now, and particularly in the days we are currently living through, those people are even more certain than ever that they are completely free. And indeed, they themselves have brought us their freedom and have laid it humbly at our feet. But we were the ones who did that. And was that what you desired, that kind of freedom? And so this is like the whole entire crux of this whole thing is that Jesus, in Ivan's estimation, and in the Grand Inquisitor's estimation, that the whole purpose of Jesus' ministry was to make people free. And so he's all saying that, like, and with that freedom, we have now finally accomplished what you didn't, which is, he'll go on to reveal what that is, but he is talking about how now the people have laid at our feet the freedom that you died for them to have. And this leads him into, because Alyosha even asks, once again, I don't understand. Is he being ironic? Is he laughing? Not at all. What he is doing is claiming the credit for himself and his kind for at last having conquered freedom and having done so in order to make people happy. For only now, he is talking about the Inquisition, of course, has it become possible to think for the first time about people's happiness. Man is constituted as a mutineer. Can mutineers ever be happy? You were given warnings, the Inquisitor says to Jesus. You had plenty of warnings and instructions, but you did not obey them. You rejected the only path by which people could have been made happy. But fortunately, when you left, you handed over the task to us. You gave us your promise. You sealed it with your word. You gave us the right to bind and loose. And so, of course, you cannot even dream of taking that right away from us now. So why have you come to get in our way? And then Alyosha says, I wonder if you could explain the meaning of that phrase. You had plenty of warnings and instructions. And Ivan responds, yes, well, that is exactly the point on which the old man wants to speak his mind. Now the Inquisitor says, the terrible and clever spirit, the spirit of self-annihilation and non-existence, the old man continues, the great spirit who spoke with you in the wilderness, and we are told in scriptures that has tempted you. Is that so? Would it be possible to say anything more true than those things which he made known to you in three questions, and which you rejected, and which in the scriptures are called temptations? Yet at the same time, if ever there took place on the earth a truly thunderous miracle, it was on that day, the day of those three temptations. Precisely in the emergence of those three questions did the miracle lie. Actually, this is one of my favorite passages in the thing. Were one to imagine, just for the sake of experiment and as an example, that those three questions put by the terrible spirit have been lost without trace from the scriptures, and that it was necessary to reconstruct them, invent and compose them anew so they could again be entered into the scriptures, and for this purpose to gather together all the sages of the earth, the rulers, the high priests, the scholars, the philosophers, the poets, and give them the task of inventing and composing three questions, but of such a kind that would not only correspond to the scale of the event, but would also express in three words, in but three human phrases, the entire future history of the world and mankind. Then do you suppose that all the great wisdom of the earth, having united together, would be able to invent anything at all, even remotely equivalent in power and depth to those three questions that were actually put to you that day by the mighty and clever spirit in the wilderness? Why, by those very questions alone, by the sheer miracle of their emergence, it is possible to gain the realization that one is dealing not with the fleeting human intelligence, but with one that is eternal and absolute. For it is as if in those three questions there is conjoined into a single whole and prophesied the entire subsequent history of mankind. There are manifested the three images in which all the unresolved historical contradictions of human nature throughout all the earth will coincide. And it's just like, I'm gonna let that breathe for a second. Like, that's crazy. Um, so he goes into talking about the temptation of Jesus and breaking down the three temptations. Um, and he does it in such a way that, like, I never have thought about. We often don't really pause on the temptations of Jesus. I mean, it's only mentioned in passing. That's like the thing that starts off the big story, you know. So we kind of pass through it to get to like the meaty stuff, we think. But um, the way that Dostoyevsky breaks down the temptations, I actually thought was very insightful. Um, I don't know, you know, it's one of those hermeneutical situations, but for the sake of even mental exercise, I mean, I wouldn't take it as gospel, but it's still, I find it edifying to consider and look at this passage with fresh eyes. Um, so, anyways, yeah, in letting that breathe, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about this passage earlier, and I think my instinct is that it is true in some sort of, you know, at least mythological sense, that it captures accurately the three temptations of mankind, that we all desire to be happy, and to the extent that we can at least maybe extend that happiness to our family, our tribe, even our nation, the world, to those who might aspire appropriately to those things. Um, these are the temptations that beset us. And so it makes sense that Jesus would be confronted with the three levers to manipulate mankind into right relationship with himself. And just off the cuff, what you were saying about skipping it to get into the meaty parts, I think that we tend to find solace in the instructive bits of the Bible, that we can abstract or intuit any type of lesson or approach to our daily lives or lives in general or whatever, that we can implement. And so if there is not an instruction or a pithy summation of a parable or a story in the gospel, it does tend to fall by the wayside. And so I find that interesting in that this is a literal encounter for what it's worth. You know, like probably some people struggle with literal, but like Jesus and the devil encounter one another in this desert, in the lonely place, and they have it out, and the devil takes his crack at Jesus before, as you say, they get into the meaty part of the gospel. And it's just such a compelling story, like to have the two main characters preceding the journey to reclaim this broken humanity that has been lost, go at it. And yeah, as we sort of got into in the last episode, the way that there are parts of the human soul that are broken out into each of the brothers, Karamazov, and Dostoevsky is trying to indicate like the competing parts of a person that we all know and experience on a daily basis, the upward aiming light side of humanity and the downward devolving dark side of humanity. And so I find it interesting here that you get to see the two avatars for those, you know, maybe general force type of descriptions of good and evil. And you see them have it out. And the conclusion is that Jesus rejects all forms of unfair leverage and coercion and chooses instead a sacrificial assumption of the burden of his task willingly and without shirking it in any of these three directions that the devil attempts to tempt him into. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's extremely important to the story, but I just think that it's cool to get to see the, I mean, ethereal and ancient, eternal struggle of good and evil in one of these scenes in the gospel. And so, yeah. And then just to go back to Dostoevsky's interpretation through Ivan, I think that the point about history is to indicate that these are the sins that we are most likely to fall prey to as we attempt to drag humanity kicking and screaming to some sort of our interpretation of good,
And
being that,
unity.
yes, and happiness, like he says. So, so yeah, it's a powerful spin on a classic tale.
Hmm. Yeah. And he even starts to kind of show his hand, like by esteeming the devil's wisdom as he's the absolute one.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
kind of wild. And so he goes on from there. Decide for yourself who is right. You are the one who questioned you or the one who questioned you that day. Remember the first question, though not in literal terms, its sense was this. You want to go into the world and are going there with empty hands, with a kind of promise of freedom, which they, in their simplicity and inborn turpitude, are unable even to comprehend, which they go in fear and awe of, for nothing has ever been more unendurable to man in human society than freedom. Look, you see those stones in that naked, burning hot wilderness? Turn them into loaves, and mankind will go trotting after you like a flock, grateful and obedient, though ever fearful that you may take away your hand, and that your loaves may cease to come their way. But you did not want to deprive man of freedom, and rejected this offer. For what kind of freedom is it, you reasoned, if obedience is purchased with loaves? You retorted that man lives not by bread alone, but are you aware that in the name of that same earthly bread, the earth spirit will rise up against you and fight with you and vanquish you, and everyone will follow it, crying, "Who is like unto this beast? He has given us fire from heaven." That's a passage from Revelation. Are you aware that centuries will pass and mankind will proclaim with the lips of its wisdom and science that there is no crime and consequently no sin either, but only the hungry? Feed them and then ask virtue of them. That's the cry. That is what will be inscribed upon the banner they will raise against you, and before which your temple will come crashing down. In the place of your temple there will be erected a new edifice, Once again, a terrible Tower of Babel will be erected. And even though this one will no more be completed than was the previous one, but even so, you would be able to avoid that new tower and abbreviate the sufferings of the human beings by 1,000 years. For after all, it is to us that they will come when they have suffered for 1,000 years with their tower. Then they will track us down again under the ground in the catacombs hiding, for we shall again be persecuted and tortured. They will find us and cry to us, feed us, for those who promised us fire from heaven have not granted it. And then we shall complete their tower, for it is he that feeds them who will complete it. And it is only we that shall feed them in your name, and lie that we do it in your name. Oh, never will they feed themselves without us. No science will give them bread while yet they are free, but the end of it will be that they will bring us their freedom and place it at our feet and say to us, enslave us if you will, but feed us. At last they themselves will understand that freedom and earthly bread and sufficiency for all are unthinkable together. For never, never will they be able to share between themselves. Um, and it keeps going in the same vein, but so this is how like it says that Jesus didn't lead into that, but now he's saying that the church did yield to that temptation of trying to get bread for be the ones that feed mankind. Um, and so it's kind of like this pattern all throughout the Grand Inquisitor passage that like shows how Jesus turned this down, even knowing full well why he did it, so they have freedom. But now he's saying, but we learn from your mistake, quote unquote. And the freedom that you died for them to have, they give it right back to us because they are weak and mutinous. And so it's like mankind wants to be enslaved. It can't stand the burden of freedom.
Yeah. I was just thinking that this is a thought that I've had reading Nietzsche. And obviously, I think we've discussed in part some of the parallels of thought, but it is remarkable if you just do a little research about Dostoyevsky and Nietzsche, the way that their thought parallels one another, and even in significance and application to the 125 years later that we live in today, and what they had projected, prophesied coming true in our culture. And so anyway, I've there's a lot of like Christianity that rejects everything that Nietzsche says because of sort of simplified versions of what his writings say. But his antagonism towards Christianity, I think, at some level, is similar to Dostoevsky's ability to encapsulate the nihilistic argument and decimate anything that is impure in Christian thinking. And so, if you just know the code words and you're able to present the gospel, and you only maybe know half of it, or you have a half truth version of the gospel that you are living by, these great thinkers will be able to get past those arguments, and you will be left crippled in their wake. And so, one thing that I notice reading Nietzsche is the way that he frames Christianity as slave moralism, let's say, um, is very akin to the Inquisitors' estimation of humanity as being weak and unwilling to assume the freedom that Christ offers. And I think these are accurate assessments of mankind's base nature. And then what I want to say about Nietzsche is that he is dealing with a version of Christianity that I don't think is ultimately true. And so to call it slave moralism is the same thing that Dostoevsky is pointing out that the church has done, is they have willingly accepted the freedom back from mankind in return for mankind's sort of blissful ignorance and their happiness. However, this is not what will save mankind. And that's even what we're going to hear here from the Inquisitor, is that it's not effective. Like these people may well go to hell, but at least they'll be happy, right? And so anyway, I just wanted to introduce that because I think it'll come back around later on in this episode. And if not, it's just the point is just that we criticize these great thinkers because we're offended. Like, well, no, that's not what Christianity. Well, listen, Christians, one, don't all think the same thing, nor is it necessarily important that they do. But it is important that they know the same person and are intimately involved in experiential relationship with them. And that is not my encapsulation of the gospel that will get people saved if they just listen to Ian and do what I say. It's a precaution to dismiss with these criticisms of our faith that can actually bolster the structural integrity if we allow them to. And so noticing the correct presumptions and presuppositions of great thinkers that are painfully incisive about what exactly is wrong with the way that we present our faith, or our doctrine, or our interpretation of the Bible, etc. If we just dismiss it, we throw their baby out with the bathwater, and we don't get to experience the regeneration that's possible from like just critical thinking. Because I don't 100% agree with Nietzsche on his estimation of what the church is all about, even insofar as he seems to be right about his estimation of the church. But it's like you he has a point. He has some kernel of truth that's worth digging for. And so, anyway, just
Yeah.
don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I think that was kind of what I was trying to somehow get there with the end of the episode, last episode, when I was talking about like trying to think of what audiences are like that are listening, and trying to be able to encourage those who maybe have been converted on the basis of logic and rationality rather than the power, demonstrable power of God. Um, is that like, um, yeah, we kind of cower away from things that challenge us deeply. Um, and that just kind of, I mean, I think it's something that plagues, it's so easy to do, just getting like an echo chamber of
Yeah, I mean, think
bias
about
confirmation.
think about the church as it's being presented by the Grand Inquisitor, that they received this freedom back from the people it was given to. They had every opportunity, these people, to live in the freedom of Christ, but instead they give it to the church so that they can live in this blissful ignorance and suffer and die, but at least not as much, and they'll be happy with the slight amelioration of the consequences of life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like exchanging one Caesar for another.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so he goes on. I think we'll. There's a lot that he breaks down this first temptation. Um, how about I will read this passage. It says, "They are depraved and mutineers, but in the end they will grow obedient. They will marvel at us and will consider us gods, because we, in standing at their head, have consented to endure freedom and rule over them. So terrible will being free appear to them at last. We shall say that we are obedient to you, and that we rule in your name. We shall deceive them again, for we shall not let you near us any more. And that deception will be our suffering, for we shall be compelled to lie." That is the significance of the first question that was asked in the wilderness. And that is what you rejected in the name of freedom, which you placed higher than anything else. Uh, yeah, in that question lay the great secret of this world. Had you accepted the loaves, you would have responded to the universal and age-old anguish of man, both as an individual creature and as a whole of mankind, namely the question, before whom should one bow down? There is for man no preoccupation more constant or more nagging than, while in a condition of freedom, quickly to find someone to bow down before. But man seeks to bow down before that which is already beyond dispute, so far beyond dispute that all human beings will instantly agree to a universal bowing down before it. For the preoccupation of these miserable creatures consists not only in finding that before which I can come to believe in and bow down before, and that it should indeed be everyone, that they should do it all together. It is this need for a community of bowing down that has been the principal torment of each individual person and of mankind as a whole since the earliest ages. For the sake of a universal bowing down, They have destroyed one another with the sword. They have created gods and challenged one another. Give up your gods and come worship ours, or else death to you and to your gods. And so it will be until the world's end, when even gods will vanish from the world. Whatever happens, they will fall down before idols. You knew, you could not fail to know that peculiar secret of human nature, but you rejected the only absolute banner that was offered to you, and that would have compelled everyone to bow down before you without dispute, the banner of earthly bread. And rejected it in the name of freedom and the bread of heaven. And so I like that he was even talking about that. Like, man desires something to bow down to, but not only that, but something that's so beyond dispute, where it's like it doesn't require faith really. It's really just like a logical, rational, like empirical basis. Like everyone can get behind this bowing down, but Jesus, he didn't yield to that first temptation to make himself indisputable according to the natural mind. It's like it does require faith and a freedom to choose to believe, not like be so compelled by an uh, overwhelming evidence. Um,
Yeah, I think that speaks to Jesus' confidence in the reality of who he is and what he came to be and do. Uh, he remarks about the bread of heaven there, the Inquisitor, and that is who Christ is. We spoke last episode about the cross and the foolishness that it is to those who are perishing, but the life that it is to those who believe. It's uh, like these rituals of communion that get twisted into like sort of meaningless things on the far end of the Protestant spectrum, and the strangely mystical, weird, like actual literal body of Christ stuff on the Catholic end of the spectrum. It's like there is probably some merit to those thoughts about like, well, it's not too important, like but it is important. That's often a Protestant approach to all liturgy. But
yeah, sacraments.
yes, it's Jesus said we should do it, so we probably should. But it's like the symbolism here is speaking to what it is that can justify the deepest, darkest suffering of mankind in the face of all nihilism and hopelessness. And it is self sacrifice, the sacrifice that God made on the cross in the form of Jesus as a man. And the two are becoming one again, man and God rejoined at that point. And that's the pattern that we are able to see and then, empowered by his spirit, live according to, that will redeem God's creation. And so with that, there's no you if you dismiss that, then you're missing the point, right? If you argue about what kind of crackers you should be eating and if it's grape juice or wine, that's like completely beside the point. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. And just our desire
And sorry,
to,
just to finish that, it not only that, but in the worst form of it, it is exactly what the Inquisitor is saying that they willingly do. It is an in group, out group arbitration to identify uh, who is going to be allowed to ease the guilt of their conscience by an authority that is below God but takes the place of God, and that's evil, right? And that is what Jesus came to give us freedom from, but it comes at the cost of death on the cross with him.
mm, yeah. I was gonna say even the desire to make things indisputable. Um,
Yes,
like
yes.
that is I think that's huge. I think that's one of the most insightful aspects of this breakdown of the first temptation is like we do that. I mean, that's just human nature. Yeah, exactly what you're kind of talking about. Like this temptation is present for us all. Like we desire to make our crusades or our movements or um, our causes indisputably uh, bowed downable to, like worthy to sacrifice ourselves for it. Which I mean, that is even in all of it. That's what worship comes down to. But for it to be indisputable, like no room for doubt, Jesus didn't do that. I mean, yeah, there's instances even like In fact, I think you even kind of can show like what, for example, like Thomas, like when he says like I won't believe until I put my hands in his wounds, and Jesus says, "You believe because you see, but blessed are those who believe without seeing." Like there's a, I don't know, like you can extract this a principle there that like um, this desire to make things indisputable, um, it's misguided. Not that it's
Yeah.
necessarily sinful. Like I don't think Thomas was sinning, and Jesus is like dissing Thomas right there. It's just like
Right.
it's just a misguided like that's not what Jesus encourages. He doesn't encourage making these things. That's why he even says like when they say get swords, like, oh, we have two swords, is that enough? He's like, yeah, enough of that. Like that's not the point either. Like just discouraging, recognizing like kind of two steps ahead. Like this could get out of hand to try to, which it did. I
Mhm.
mean, as we see with the Inquisition right here, like
Yeah, yeah.
we're gonna decimate you if you don't bow down to our God.
In the interview with Wayne Jacobson, I read a quote back to him from one of his books, and it's a quote about living with uncertainty. Uh,
Hmm.
he says, "We find being certain of something wrong more comfortable than to live open handed with uncertainty." And Wayne is talking about living in the freedom of the love of the Father. If you've read anything of his, that's the theme. And all of his books are variations on this theme. And some of them deal with people who uh, are sensing that God is leading them to live their their God journey outside of the infrastructure of the human institution of the church. And so that looks different for everybody across the world. Wayne has, this is not to pump his tires, but like he has a global audience. And so I'm fascinated by this phenomenon where people in Australia and the UK and South Africa and America and Canada and Mexico, they all have this sense of needing to move beyond the institution, which is providing them with something, but not necessarily where their personal experience with God is leading them to carry out their relationship with Him. And so, this is something that my wife and I are tentatively sort of exploring as we feel that God is leading us in that direction. And it's not without concern and pushback from people, well meaning people in our life that are concerned about the boundaries of where does it end? What else won't you believe in at the end of this? Uh, and that is a very difficult thing to go through. But it's also uh, I think indicative of this, we would rather be certain of something wrong. And that's a very strong word, but like we would rather have something certain that's more comfortable than explore open-handedly the uncertainty of following this experiential reality of the Spirit of God. And even experiential is like a trigger word for some people. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, what are you trying to? No, this is what the Inquisitor is talking about. He's saying we've removed all necessary interactions with God for these people so that they never have to encounter Jesus, the perfect image of God, who was sacrificed, the perfect image of sin, right? He is the serpent up on the staff. He is the poison that's killing us. We get to see in that image all that destroys us, that is us,
Mm.
and we are healed by it when we look at it.
Yeah.
But we would rather not interface with that power and instead move in the direction of the comfortable certainty of a slow, desperate death. And that is uh terrifying. That's more terrifying to me than the terrifying vast open spaces of this desert after I say no to making stones into bread. Like I would much rather willingly, freely suffer the consequences of following Jesus and the pain and suffering that I take on to do that than to be lulled into the certainty, the comfort of certainty.
Mm. Wow. That was really good. That was really good.
Well, it's been happening to me for a long time now, so I've had a lot of time to think those things through.
All right. That was great. I think that actually
Mhm.
segues well into this right here too. Um, With bread you were given an undisputed banner. Give bread, and man will bow down, for nothing is more undisputed than bread. But if at the same time someone takes mastery of his conscience without your knowledge, oh, then he will even throw down your bread and follow the one who seduces his conscience. In that you were right. For the secret of human existence does not consist in living merely, but in what one lives for. Without a firm idea of what he is to live for, man will not consent to live and will sooner destroy himself than remain on the earth, even though all around him there be loaves. That is so, but how has it worked out? And this is it right here. Instead of taking mastery over people's freedom, you have increased that freedom even further. Or did you forget that peace of mind and even death are dearer to man than free choice and the cognition of good and evil?
Mm.
Or did you forget that peace of mind and even death are dearer to man than free choice and the cognition of good and evil? There's nothing more seductive for man than the freedom of his conscience, but there is nothing more tormenting for him either. And so then, in place of a firm foundation for the easing of the human conscience once and for all, you took everything that was exceptional, enigmatic, and indeterminate, took everything that was beyond people's capacity to bear, and therefore acted as though you did not love them at all. And who was this? The one who had come to sacrifice his life for them. Instead of taking mastery of people's freedom, you augmented it and saddled the spiritual kingdom of man with it forever. You desired that man's love should be free, that he should follow you freely, enticed and captivated by you. Henceforth, in place of the old firm law, man was himself to decide with a free heart what is good and what is evil, with only your image before him to guide him. But surely you never dreamed that he would at last reject and call into question even your image and your truth, were he to be oppressed by so terrible a burden as freedom of choice. He'll exclaim at last that the truth is not in you, for it would have been impossible to leave them in more confusion and torment than you did when you left them so many worries and unsolvable problems. Thus you yourself laid the foundation for the destruction of your own kingdom, and no one else should be blamed for it. And yet, is that really what was offered you? There are three powers, only three powers on the earth that are capable of eternally vanquishing and ensnaring the consciences of those feeble mutineers for their happiness. Those powers are miracle, mystery, and authority. You rejected the first, the second, and the third, and yourself gave the lead in doing so. When the wise and terrible spirit set you on a pinnacle of the temple and said to you, if you would know whether you are the Son of God, then cast yourself down from hence, for it is written that the angels will take charge of him and bear him up, and he will not fall and dash himself to pieces. Then you will know if you are the Son of God, and will prove how much faith you have in your Father. But having heard him through, you rejected his offer and did not give way and did not cast yourself down. Oh, of course, in that you acted proudly and magnificently, like God. But people, that weak, mutinying tribe, are they gods? Oh, that you understood that by taking only one step, the step of casting yourself down, you would instantly have tempted the Lord and would have lost all faith in him, and would have dashed yourself to pieces against the earth which you had come to save, and the clever spirit which had tempted you would rejoice. But I repeat, are there many such as you? And could you really have supposed, even for a moment, that people would have the strength to resist such a temptation? Is human nature really of a kind as to be able to reject the miracle and to make do at such terrible moments of life, moments of the most terrible, fundamental, and tormenting spiritual questions, with only a free decision of the heart? Oh, you knew that your great deed would be preserved in the scriptures, would attain to the depth of the ages and to the outermost limits of the earth, and you hoped that in following you, man too would make do with God, not requiring a miracle. But you did not know that no sooner did man reject the miracle then he would at once reject God also. For man does not seek God so much as miracles. And since man is not strong enough to get by without the miracle, he creates new miracles for himself, his own now, and bows down before the miracle of the quack and the witchcraft of the peasant woman. Even though he is a mutineer, heretic, and atheist 100 times over. You did not come down from the cross when they shouted to you, mocking and teasing you, come down from the cross and we will believe. You did not come down because, again, you did not want to enslave man with a miracle, because you thirsted for a faith that was free, not miraculous. You thirsted for a love that was free, not for the servile ecstasies of the slave, but for the might that has inspired him with the dread once and for all. But even here, you had too high an opinion of human beings. For of course they are slaves, so they are created mutineers.
Hmm. It occurred to me when you were reading that the price that we pay for interactions with God is overwhelming. And so there's passages in Exodus where God refuses to let Moses look at his face because it would kill him. And this was commonly held as tradition. The I think for the remainder um, of the journey of Israel. And I think it's funny because before Moses, you have Israel, Jacob, wrestling with God in what is an extremely intimate struggle, uh, physically uh, trying to submit one or the other. And uh, it's a beautiful image of our relationship with Him, God, that we would uh, viscerally, physically be in this struggle to the death, presumably, to submit him. And we can't do it. We cannot kill him. And when you're speaking of the conscience, I'm just thinking that that is the burden that we bear. This knowledge of good and evil that is the center point of the plot of the first story in the Bible is like it's too much to bear. And that's kind of the point of this freedom, like the freedom to choose between good and evil. That's too much to bear. Well, the problem is that we have our conscience, and so we are constantly directed by it, either in fear or in this invitation of love and freedom that God has come to give us in the person of Jesus. And so when Moses is told, "You can only look at the back of me," it's because it would kill him to look at God and be uh burned away, the parts of him that are not like that. There's the fiery sword that's placed outside the Garden of Eden that protects the garden from entry, and it turns every which way, and that means that it's like this omni sword that will cut away all that it needs to in order for the potential entrant to re-enter this paradise, right? And so uh the image there is of the cutting away of like dead wood from a tree, or the burning away of dross, imperfections in a precious metal, that what's wrong in us will burn away. But then compared to the ultimate right and good God, there is nothing right and good in us apart from him. And so recognizing that there's this already but not yet project that God is working on, he does not confront mankind with his presence except progressively through the journey of Israel, in order that as we suffer the burden of conscience uh, that has befallen us by the untimely eating of the tree of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, uh, we see God's compassion and his like plan or something to ultimately confront us in the image of Jesus, who is now faceless to us. We have not seen him, right? And you're talking about Thomas and the way that he actually saw him and physically put his hand in the wounds. Uh, we are freed from the burden of knowing exactly who Jesus was looked like, but we're also freed into the power of living exactly like Jesus lived by his spirit. And that's like so important, that hope that we have, the power that we have through this encounter that Jesus has made possible by not only demonstrating, but accomplishing the sacrifice that is necessary for union with God.
Hmm. Yeah. Milton calls this passage the Temptations paradise regained.
Yes,
And this
yes,
is like
precisely.
what Jesus was fighting for was This could have constituted his whole ministry if he gave in to these temptations. Like that would have been the basis on which he draws all men unto himself. But instead he says, I will be lifted up, I'll be put to death, and thus draw all men to myself. It's not I will bring bread or I will prove without a shadow of a doubt to myself that I'm the son of God. That's the other thing too. Like he had to have faith in
Mm,
himself, which is kind of crazy.
yeah.
Uh,
No. That's a really important way to read the scriptures, I think, that that can translate to our own lives. That it goes back to faith in God and faith in humanity. You are humanity. So if you live your life without faith in humanity, you're undermining yourself. The nihilist cannot be uh confident,
mm, yeah. And so this is kind of where the Grand Inquisitor starts to kind of get more shifting into it, launching an accusation against Jesus. He says, you had too high of an opinion of human beings. Uh, and respecting him so much, you acted as though you had ceased to have compassion for him because you demanded too much of him. And yet, who was this? The very one you had loved more than yourself. Had you respected mankind less, you would have demanded of him less, and that would have been closer to love, for his burden would have been lighter. He is weak and dishonorable. So what if now he mutinizes against your power and is proud of his mutiny? This is the pride of a small boy, a schoolboy. These are little children mutinying in a class, driving out their teacher. But the ecstasy of the little boys will come to an end. It will cost them dearly. They will overthrow the temples and soak the earth in blood. But at last the stupid children will realize that even though they are mutineers, they are feeble mutineers who are unable to sustain their mutiny. In floods of stupid tears, they will at last recognize that the intention of the one who created them mutineers was undoubtedly to make fun of them. They will say this in despair, and their words will be blasphemy. Their words will be blasphemy, which will make them even more unhappy. For human nature cannot endure blasphemy, and in the end invariably take revenge for it. Thus restlessness, confusion, unhappiness, those are the lot of human beings now, after all that you underwent for the sake of their freedom. Your great prophet says in an allegorical vision that he saw all those who took part in the first resurrection, and that of each tribe were 12,000. But if there were so many of them, they could not have been human beings, but gods. They had borne your cross. They had borne decades in the hungry and barren wilderness, living on roots and locusts. And of course, it goes without saying that you may point with pride to those children of freedom, of a love that is free, of the free and magnificent sacrifice they have made in your name. Remember, however, that there were only a few thousand of them. Those were gods. But what about the rest? And in what way are the other weak human beings to blame for not having been able to bear the same things as the mighty? And so he starts to pretty much show that like Jesus didn't actually love mankind, and that uh, the church is now taking more love and more pity because they respect mankind less, and so therefore uh, free them of the burden of freedom and conscience. Um,
Yeah. This is like many lies. It's a half truth. And so, if you think about what I was saying earlier about the mischaracterization of Christianity that Nietzsche attacks, he's absolutely correct in attacking it. But when he misappropriates it to the totality of the Christian endeavor, uh, or the reality of Jesus's church in the world, you are you suffer the consequences. And so, as you were reading, it was becoming more and more apparent to me that this is actually the work of the devil, like
yeah,
himself, not a demon. These accusations that are leveled against Jesus are precisely the machinations of the dread spirit that works against God. And the liberation of mankind is his project, right? That he would set mankind free to pursue his own happiness as a god or whatever. I think that it's so it's so interesting because the character here is a character that's being written by a nihilist to portray the authority of the church in the 1500s. And we're deep here in the Inception plot, right?
yeah,
And
no, seriously,
and so uh when you look at this, it's the peak authority of the church that is arguing against its savior and Lord in Jesus, and that can only ever come from the devil, right? That antichrist spirit is the devil. And like, even me saying the devil, I'm saying that because there was a good quote in hold on, my note is on the wrong thing. Um oh, I don't have it in front of me, but basically just that uh the devil is working to give us the illusion of freedom, and he's okay with either one of these uh things that's being put forth. So that's what I found interesting, is that the father here, the cardinal, he is saying that uh what Jesus did, that is actually bad. And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, the argument is accurate because he's not referring to what Jesus did. He's only using the motivations of Jesus to accuse Jesus of harming humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But in the way that the devil does, he's lying. He is twisting what the devil actually did in the beginning of the story, which is attempt to offer freedom to mankind such that it would bring sin and death into the world. And then he's juxtaposing that over against a worse option, which is what the church is carrying out, and he's presenting that as the light, right? That we can give you this illusion of salvation, and you can be less free. You don't have the burden of being free. We'll take care of your consciences. Don't worry about that. And so you have two options, and both of them are lies, right? And one of them is even characterized as the work of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very fascinating, very like well documented here by Ivan and Dostoyevsky.
Yeah. Yeah. And he actually, to justify what you're saying here too, um, he says this right after that passage of, did you really come for only the chosen ones? But if it is so that you only came for the chosen ones, then there is a mystery there, and it's not for us to comprehend it. And if there is a mystery, then we were within our rights to propagate that mystery and teach them that it was not the free decision of their hearts and not love that mattered, but the mystery, which they must obey blindly, even in opposition to their consciences. And that was what we did. We corrected your great deed and founded it upon miracle, mystery, and authority. And people were glad that they had once been brought together into a flock, that at last from their hearts had been removed such a terrible gift which had brought them so much torment. Were we right to teach and act thus, would you say? Did we not love mankind when we so humbly admitted his helplessness, lightening his burden with love, allowing his feeble nature, even sin, but with our permission? Why have you come to get in our way now? And why do you gaze at me so silently and sincerely with those meek eyes of yours? Why do you not get angry? I do not want your love, because I myself do not love you. And what is there I can conceal from you? Do you think I don't know who I'm talking to? What I have to say to you is all familiar to you already. I can read it in your eyes. Do you think I would conceal our secret from you? Perhaps it is my own lips that you want to hear it from. Then listen. We are not with you, but with him. There is our secret. We have long been not with you, but with him. 8 centuries now. It is now just 8 centuries since we took from him that which you in indignation rejected, the final gift he offered you, when he showed you all the kingdoms of the world. We took from him Rome and the sword of Caesar, and announced that we alone were the kings of the world, the only kings, even though to this day we have not succeeded in bringing our task to its complete fulfillment. But whose is the blame for that? Oh, this task is as yet only at its beginning, but it has begun. The world will have to wait for its accomplishment for a long time yet, and it will have to suffer much, but we shall reach our goal and shall be Caesars, and then we shall give thought to the universal happiness of human beings. And yet, even back then, you could have taken the sword of Caesar. Why did you reject that final gift? Had you accepted that third counsel of the mighty spirit, you would have supplied everything that man seeks in the world. That is, someone to bow down before, someone to entrust one's conscience to, and a way of at last uniting everyone into an undisputed, general, and consensual ant heap, for the need of universal union is the third and final torment of human beings. Invariably, mankind as a whole has striven to organize itself on a universal basis. Many great people there have been, and people with great histories, but the loftier those people, the more unhappy, for more acutely than others have they been conscious of the need for universal union of human beings. The great conquerors, the Tamerlanes, the Genghis Khans, hurtled like a whirlwind through the world, striving to conquer the universe. But even they, though they did so unconsciously, expressed the same great need of mankind for universal and general union. Had you accepted the world in the purple of Caesar, you would have founded a universal kingdom and given men universal peace. For who shall reign over human beings if not those who reign over their consciences, and in whose hands are their loaves? Well, we took the sword of Caesar, and of course, in taking it, rejected you and followed him, the devil. Oh, centuries yet will pass of the excesses of the free intellect, of their science and anthropophagy, because having begun to erect their Tower of Babel without us, they will end in anthropophagy. But then the beast will come crawling to our feet and lick them and sprinkle them with the bloody tears of his eyes. We will sit upon the beast and raise the cup, and on it will be written mystery. But then and only then for human beings will begin the kingdom of peace and happiness. You are proud of your chosen ones, but all you have are chosen ones, and we shall bring the rest to all. And we shall bring rest to all. So that's how he introduces the next temptation, and kind of just fully comes out like, and in accepting this temptation, we rejected you, Jesus, and received the crown of Caesar. That's why it's Rome. So it's the Holy Roman Empire. And then he kind of brings in, he kind of does this in The Idiot as well. It's really interesting the times that Dostoyevsky introduces eschatological interpretations. It's normally through the mouth of someone who is like has no authority in the matter, or at least ought not to be taken as like this is the interpretation of that passage. But at the same time, yeah, it's really, he does a little similar thing in The Idiot, but here he is saying that the whore of Babylon that's talked about in Revelation 19, I think it is, that is the Roman Catholic Church that sits upon the beast, which actually the Lutherans during the Protestant Reformation, I think, accused the Pope of being even during that time. But yeah, there is some sort of this striving for universalism, and you hear it talked about a lot. Globalism, that is what's being addressed even here, and that's what even Jesus turns down in the temptations, according to this interpretation of the passage. And I think that's very interesting. Of what you said too, I'm glad you clarified. Like it's now made clear. Like this is the thoughts of the devil concerning the ministry of Jesus. You can read this as like a screw tape type passage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the three temptations. And he goes even deeper. I mean, like, this is one paragraph that has been going on for a couple of pages we've been reading, and it goes on for 2 more pages. But yeah. Yeah, any thoughts on the third temptation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by the ability of the evil one to twist these good and God-given things. So like uh miracles and mystery and authority are not the way that God wrests our freedom from us and establishes his kingdom with mankind, serving him and obeying him and being enraptured by him. It is, they are God given things. Miracles are good things. Jesus even he did a miracle right before he was arrested, right? And this is why he was arrested, because he can't help but be benevolent and good and restorative in his nature, and yet the church only allows for the miraculous within the context of their authority and their mystery. And so these are the unholy trinity here, but it's only because of their use as leverage against the slavish impulses of mankind. And so it's like, in order to shepherd all people into one flock, we will implement these tools to accomplish our goal. Where Jesus is, yeah, like God is authoritative and mysterious and miraculous all in one. Each of the three persons of God have those attributes. And so it's fascinating to me to look at this and say, yeah, well, like, why didn't Jesus do that? And I think Dostoevsky's impulse here is correct, that it's because we couldn't help but, throw ourselves at him in servitude, but not in a free or we couldn't accept an invitation in the state that we would be put in by uh Jesus's misappropriation of these powerful devices. So anyway, yeah, this whole thing has been a delicate dance of honesty, reality, deception, power, and evil and good. And like, I'm just seeing how alluring those things are, even to my own heart. As I navigate a relationship now today, you know, 200 years from when Dostoevsky was writing this, that I still have these base natural impulses towards those types of things. And whether on the receiving end or on the giving end, as in whether to be the authority or to be the one under authority, there's an impulse to both. And uh yeah, I don't the kingdom of God has authoritative structures and hierarchies built into it. I do believe that, but it is not in service of compulsion. And the same goes for mystery. He's talking about like um who and why and how, and these, I mean, it's funny because that's a mystery, right? Questions that go beyond the scope of our imagination. A mystery novel uh is concluded, and therefore it is not a mystery, right? Because
Mm.
you know what happens. But mystery, in the sense of like the mystics and the mystery of the Holy Spirit and God and all of that, they exist so far beyond what we can actually experience. And so this is sort of like the imitation of mystery, even from the church, right? They have this Wizard of Oz quality where they exist behind the curtain so that you don't know that it's just that guy behind the curtain pulling the levers, making it appear as though they're doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Then he.
I also am, and sorry, I
No,
just
you're
am
good.
also struck by and inspired by uh, the emphasis that Dostoevsky puts on Jesus's desire for our freedom, because we don't desire it. That's the point. We don't even desire
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
giving us, right? And so the misery of the suffering of humanity that we incur upon ourselves is our fault. Like, it is our lack of willingness to accept from the hand of God the life that he has given us. And obviously, like, I feel crass in this episode compared to last episode with all of the horrific examples of human suffering that were we only touched on one of them because of the examples being too horrific to recount. And so I don't want to dismiss that in saying like, accept it, like, just take your lot in life and live it, do the best that you can. It's not about that. It's about I'm like getting worked up because it's so deceptive. You're just in this hall of mirrors of, well, is it God or was that the devil, or did and this from living out the suffering of your life, that you get it twisted. We read that passage in Isaiah that God says, I give the light and I give the darkness. It's me. I'm doing these things. And so we get that twisted. We're like, oh, he's doing these things to me. Like, is there any way for him to stop doing that? But he's always working in this direction of self-sacrifice, himself, not you on his
Mm.
behalf, not
Hmm.
you just because he told you to. That's like authority. And not you for whatever reason. That's the mystery. and not you, because then magically things will work out. That's miracles. And so it's like
Yeah.
he's doing it for you himself. And that's the character of God that cuts
For
through all this
himself.
BS, because it's like, yeah, yeah. It gets confusing when you get tied down into these false dichotomies, like the two structures that the Inquisitor is laying out, and uh, and the dismissal of who Jesus is. Because if you don't think he's God, then like there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, like on that problem, like who is Jesus. But if you do believe that he's God, then that this is God sacrificing himself on your behalf for you, for your benefit. And so these things that he's causing, that he says I am responsible for, he's saying I'm taking it on I'm dying on a cross for these things.
Hmm. Yeah. And even I just listened to a sermon not too long ago, and it was talking about when Jesus decides to get baptized, and he kind of, this was a Messianic Jew, and he was kind of tying in how Jesus also fulfilled the role that Israel was commissioned to fulfill. Like in Exodus, when God makes his covenant, he says, "You will be to me a priest, and by you the world will know my name." But as we see through the prophets, that Israel fails that calling. And so in those passages, I think it leads up to that Isaiah passage. I think it starts around there. It's Isaiah 46 to 53, where we know Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. Um, there's like this ambiguous switchback between, he's talking about my servant Israel, and then Israel, and then my servant. And it's like, okay, is it talking about the nation of Israel, or is it talking about this individual? And then it kind of becomes clear out Isaiah 53. But it's because that Jesus fulfills even that ministry too, like the role that Israel is to play. And so when he decides to get baptized, he's like, we must do this to fulfill all righteousness. It's like he is also stepping into the sins of the nation, uh, and recognizing I too, uh, because of just being associated with this culture, I too need to be cleansed. I need to submit to the cleansing, um, because I'm taking on the sin as well. Like I'm identifying with the sinful culture right now. Like I don't know, the way he laid it out, I never really thought of it that way. Like um, that's what starts his ministry as well. And then he goes into the desert, So um,
Hmm.
just yeah, the humanity, the human aspect. I think this is really what's touching on a lot.
Yeah, I just we talked about this, right? We talked about it last time about the line that runs between the human heart, that divides good and evil. That's a butchering of Solzhenitsyn's quote, about how we can be good and we can be evil, and that's the dilemma. And so Alyosha believes maybe too strongly that we can be good, and is being forced to confront through his brother Ivan the reality that we are bad. And Ivan is uncomfortably presented with this desire in himself to live life and enjoy its beauty and goodness, because he is fully aware of the evil that he himself is capable of, and his brother, and his father, and all of humanity, um, together. And so this idea that Jesus was exempt from that is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. They had councils to establish creeds about the divinity of Jesus and the humanity. Those two things go together. And if you dismiss the full human suffering experience of Jesus, then you will dismiss the relevance of Jesus to contribute. I'm excited saying this because I'm like discovering it for myself, that this is the significance of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, that he was human and that he was divine. Like 100%. We could do an episode on both. That would be
Yeah.
confusing. But
Yeah.
I'm just
Hyperstatic
saying,
union.
exactly. Yeah, we'd have to do that one in the middle. But
Yeah.
but it's like we err on one side or the other, and then we
Mhm.
end up in these this false dichotomy of, uh if he was just a man, we end up serving the church in their alleviation of our suffering through deceptive means. And if we think that he uh was just God, then we don't recognize the value of his sacrifice as it applies to us as an example and a uh, provision for our sins.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like if you only do the human side, then you just get humanitarian view of the gospel. And if you do just the spiritual, then you get a Gnostic view of the gospel. Like, and
Yeah.
there is a paradox there. Um,
Yeah, and I think the right of the evangelical church end up on the Gnostic side. We've discussed that a little bit here on the podcast. And I think that the left end up in that meaningless sort of humanitarian state of
yeah.
service and hope
Social
and
justice.
kindness. Yeah. And it's not that that isn't of great, immense value. It's just that it is not the totality, and therefore it's stripped of its
Yeah.
value.
Or that view is substantiated in the gospels, because obviously Jesus, I mean, throughout the whole entirety of the Bible, he has a lot to say about justice and loving the stranger and the alien amongst you, and like, and those.
Yeah.
But if you just like make that the full base of the conversation, there's so many. There narrow is the way, and his kingdom's now of this world, and so it's like, um, yeah,
Yeah. And when you
that's what
make
I've
it
been noticing a
only
lot in
about
my
what
conversations.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
you good.
When you make it only about what he did, then you end up on that Gnostic side of the spiritualism. And when you make it only about what you do, or what you can do, then you end up on the humanitarian side of things. And it's very interesting to look at it and see, because like I'm probably closer to the right side of evangelical Christians, and so I see the Gnosticism, and it freaks me out because it's like we talk about Gnostics. It's a Bible believing culture that I am a part of these days, and so we encounter deep philosophical thought around the Gnostics and what they got wrong, and then we do the same things that they did,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so it's like very concerning. And then I would imagine, like, I don't really have an impulse. I definitely am like more open actually to the humanitarian side of things. But I imagine you end up on that side thinking like, uh, what can we do? I just find it fascinating. What can we do to help alleviate the suffering? That's not a bad question. That's a very good question.
Hmm.
But then when it lands you under the authority of the Catholic Church in Seville in the 1500s, you're killing people to help them. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a good
Or
plan.
even or
And
even Nazism or even communism. Like
yes, yes,
this
those
this
are
can happen.
gospels too. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean they utilize, well, not so much communism, but Hitler definitely utilized the Bible to bolster a lot of fascism in Italy, and I mean even the Roman Catholic Church kind of liked what Mussolini was doing.
Yeah,
So
and you can say what you will about uh communism, but I would argue that the Russian people that fell prey to the communist regimes were arguing and discussing the nature of God regularly. They were devoutly Orthodox Christian, and they ended up in this place because of their approach to, yeah, who Jesus is, divine, human, etc.
mhm. Well, and then even the question of human suffering, how to alleviate it. It's like um, that really is that's the whole of, I think, every. I think even what was purported by Ivan is like that is truly the basis of all religious thought, which even these philosophical ideologies, you could try to say they're not religious, but they are. I mean, they are religious in nature. See what he said, even if we do away with gods, we're still going to have these idols, these ideas. Um,
Hmm.
and it's the same type of, appeals to the same aspects of our human nature, this impulse to bow down undisputably to something, in order to, so that we have harmony and peace. Um, and so really every single worldview attempts to bring about that day, that utopian mindset we all desire. We've brought this up before in conversation in this podcast, that like we all desire rest for our soul. We all desire unity. It's just a matter, we have our own ideas of getting there. And even in so saying that, I even have my own ideas about getting there that is contrary to what Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. And so it's like I have to either I humble myself, recognize like, I could be a Peter saying to Jesus, no, far be it from you, you're not gonna die. And then
Hmm.
Jesus turns to me and says, get behind me, Satan. Right? Like that's
Hmm.
uh that's the whole entire
Yeah.
thing. It's like Yeah.
Yeah,
And
a quick callback there to the last episode, and I definitely encourage you to go watch it. You referenced Jesus asking Peter who Peter thought Jesus was, and he said, "I think you're the Savior. I think you're the Messiah." And then Peter receives his new name from Jesus. Jesus tells him who he thinks he is, and Jesus changes his name to the Rock, this unshakable foundation of his church. And it's such an incredible moment in a story that will then follow Peter's journey as he is shaken and he does fail in his faith. And so that's a little foreshadowing, right? The no, 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 don't do it that way, Jesus, because Peter's faith is not like sound. And so there's this shaking that needs to take place of Peter's foundations. And then uh and then you see it progress, and it's shaky when he starts, like after Pentecost. It's like good at Pentecost and then gets bad. And
yeah.
it's like Jesus believes in Peter that he is the rock. Like not just believes in some ridiculous sense that we often mean about Jesus, but he
Yeah.
spoke he spoke that into Peter's life because he's saying, I'm committed to you as the full potential of who you are and who you were created to be. And he supports Peter's life from that point on. But it is this reciprocal faith in God and in humanity that Peter must have, because Peter has to believe in God's faith in him to have made him, to
Mhm.
have established this role for him, and to sustain him through this power of his spirit to accomplish this role. And I'm going to pull back in the Isaiah 45 passage really quickly, because I left off at verse 8. And so I'm going to start in verse 9 here. And it says, "What sorrow awaits those who argue with their creator." I would say that is the epitome of
Mm.
not having faith in God and then not having faith in humanity. They come as a consequence of each other, because God has faith in humanity. That's the point of this, you know. He says, Isaiah is quoting God, excuse me, and he says, "Does a clay pot argue with its maker? Does the clay dispute with the one who shapes it, saying, 'Stop what you're doing it wrong'? Does the pot exclaim, 'How clumsy can you be? How terrible it would be if a newborn baby said to its father, Why was I born?' Or if it said to its mother, 'Why did you make me this way?' This is what the Lord says, the Holy One of Israel and your Creator. Do you question what I do for my children? Do you give me orders about the work of my hands? I am the one who made the earth and created people to live on it. With my hands I stretched out the heavens. All the stars are at my command. I will raise up Cyrus to fulfill my righteous purpose, and I will guide his actions. He will restore my city and free my captive people without seeking a reward. I, the Lord of heaven's armies, have spoken. This is what the Lord says. You will rule the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, and the Sabians. They will come to you with all their merchandise, and it will all be yours. They will follow you as prisoners in chains. They will fall to their knees in front of you and say, God is with you, and he is the only God. There is no other. Truly, O God of Israel, our Savior, you work in mysterious ways. All craftsmen who make idols will be humiliated. They will all be disgraced together, but the Lord will save the people of Israel with eternal salvation throughout everlasting ages. They will never again be humiliated and disgraced. For the
Mm.
Lord is God, and he created the heavens and earth and put everything in its place, and he made the world to be lived in, not to be a place of empty chaos. I am the Lord, he says, and there is no other. I publicly proclaim bold promises. I do not whisper obscurities in some dark corner. I would
Hmm.
not have told the people of Israel to seek me if I could not be found. I, the Lord, speak only what is true and declare only what is right."
Amen. Wow. So even in that vein, I mean, like, this, you kind of see like just the the radical embodiment of the Luciferian proclivity in mankind and human nature, as a willingness to submit to the force that doesn't uh, believe what God says of himself, and is that clay potter that argues with and asserts its own will, um, to bring about even what God purports to bring about. That's the crazy thing too. It's like, it's even for them to even have that as a virtue is on the basis of God proclaimed that to be a virtue. And then like, well, but we know how to get there. Uh, you kind of suck at bringing about what you claim to be about. And so with the authority you gave us, we finished what you couldn't or didn't finish. And so the Inquisitor goes on to describe the world that this utopian mindset. And it's really interesting that this is like in a similar vein as like Brave New World, as like 1984, these dystopian stories. And because I think during that same time, modernism was really kicking up, and a lot of modernism had visions of grandeur, of utopia. And it's very much in that same vein of Nietzschean, God is dead and we have killed him, and now we need to come up with a new virtue. We need to envision a new world. And he recognized the burden that is, and really the impossibility of ever achieving the unity that was found in under even Catholicism, which is interesting, at least in the West. And so, anyways, he describes this dystopian mindset, showing the polies there. It's like the Wizard of Oz kingdom, but he's describing the wizard's conduct. And then he says the most agonizing secrets. I'm sorry. All will be happy, all the millions of beings, except for the 100,000 who govern them. For only we who preserve the mystery, only we shall be unhappy. There'll be thousands upon millions of happy babes and 100,000 martyrs who have taken upon themselves the curse of the knowledge of good and evil. Quietly they will die, and quietly they will fade away in your name. And beyond the tomb will find only death. But we shall preserve the secret, and for the sake of their happiness will lure them with a heavenly and eternal reward. For if there were anything in the other world, it goes without saying that it would not be for the likes of them. It is said and prophesied that you will come and prevail anew, will come with your chosen ones, your proud and mighty ones, but we will say that they have saved only themselves, while we have saved all. It is said that the whore who sits on the beast holding her mystery will be disgraced, that the weak will rise up in mutiny again. They will tear her purple and render naked her desolate body. But then I shall arise and draw your attention to the thousands upon millions of happy babes who know not sin. And we who for the sake of their happiness have taken their sins upon us, we shall stand before you and say, judge us if you can and dare. That's wild. You may say as well, know that I am not afraid of you. You may as well know that I am not afraid of you. You may as well know that I too was in the wilderness, that I too nourished myself on roots and locusts, that I too blessed the freedom with which you have blessed human beings. I too prepared myself to join the number of your chosen ones, the number of the strong and the mighty, with a yearning to fulfill the number. But I came to my senses again and was unwilling to serve madness. I returned and adhered to the crowd of those who have corrected your great deed. I left the proud and returned to the humble for the sake of their happiness. What I say to you will come to pass, and our kingdom shall be accomplished. I tell you again, tomorrow you will see the obedient flock, which at the first nod of my hand will rush to rake up the hot embers to the bonfire on which I am going to burn you, for having come to get in our way. For if there ever was one who deserved our bonfire more than anyone else, it is you. Tomorrow I'm going to burn you. It says, Ivan paused. He had grown flushed from talking and talking with passion. Now that he had stopped, however, he suddenly smiled. Alyosha, who had listened to him all this time without saying anything, though towards the end in a state of extreme agitation, he had several times attempted to interrupt the flow of his brother's speech, but had evidently held himself in check, suddenly began to speak as though he had leapt into motion. But that is preposterous, he exclaims, turning red. Your poem is a eulogy of Jesus, not a vilification of him, as you intended it. And who will listen to you on the subject of freedom? That is a fine way to understand it, a fine way. That is how it is understood in the Orthodox faith. Oh, that is That is not how it's understood in the Orthodox faith. That's Rome, and not even Rome completely either. That isn't true. It's the worst elements in Catholicism, the Inquisitors, the Jesuits. In any case, a fantastic caricature like your Inquisitor could not possibly have existed. Um, and then they kind of have a discussion of like, could someone like this even exist? Someone who's like willing to be this martyr for the sake of his love for humankind and couldn't shake off, but he's genuine in uh, his conviction that he loves mankind more than God. So he's willing to burn these hundreds of people in order to secure really prosperity for the people that he has taken under as a shepherd to them. Um, and then uh, I'm wondering if I should even read this passage. We're kind of getting exhaustive. Alyosha pretty much claims that they have no secret except perhaps atheism. That is their only secret. Your Inquisitor doesn't believe in God. That's his whole secret. And Ivan responds, so what if that is true? At last you've realized it. And indeed it is true. That is indeed the only secret. But that is not suffering. Even for a man such as he, who has wasted his entire life on a heroic feat in the wilderness and has not been cured of his love for mankind. And in the decline of his days, he became clearly persuaded that only the counsel of the terrible spirit could in any way reconstitute in tolerable order the feeble mutineers, imperfect trial creatures who were created as a bad joke. And lo, persuaded of this, he sees that it is necessary to proceed according to the indication of the clever spirit, the terrible spirit of death and destruction, and to such end accept deceit and falsehood, and lead people consciously to death and destruction, and deceive them moreover all of the way, so that they do not notice whither they are being led, so that at least on the way those pathetic blind creatures shall believe themselves happy. And note that it is deceit in the name of the one in whose ideal the old man had all his life so passionately believed. Is that not a misfortune? And even if there were only one man such as he in this entire army, thirsting for power for the sake of mere sordid earthly blessings, there would not one such man be enough to produce a tragedy. Who can say perhaps that accursed old man who loved mankind with such a stubborn original love exists even now in the form of a whole crowd of such unique old men, not by mere accident but as a secret alliance formed long ago by the preservation of the mystery for its preservation from feeble and unhappy human beings in order to make them happy. That is certainly the case and must be so. I fancy that even among the Masons, there is something of the same sort of mystery at the basis of their movement, and that the Catholics hate the Freemasons so much because they see them as rivals, a division of the unity of the idea, while there must be one flock and one shepherd. As a matter of fact, in defending my thesis like this, I feel like an author who is unable to withstand your criticism. Enough of this. Then Alyosha blurts out, I think you're a Freemason yourself. You don't believe in God, he added, this time with extreme sorrow. It seemed to him, moreover, that his brother was gazing at him with mockery. How does your poem end? He asked suddenly, looking at the ground. Or have we had the end already? And then Ivan ends the poem like this. I was going to end it like this. When the Inquisitor falls silent, he waits for a certain amount of time to hear what his captive will say in response. He finds his silence difficult to bear. He has seen that the prisoner has listened to him all this time with quiet emotion, gazing straight into his eyes and evidently not wishing to raise any objection. The old man would like the other to say something to him, even if it is bitter, terrible, but he suddenly draws near to the old man without saying anything, and quietly kisses him on his bloodless 90-year-old lips. That is his only response. The old man shudders. Something has stirred at the corners of his mouth. He goes to the door, opens it, and says to him, Go and do not come back. Do not come back at all. Ever. Ever. And he releases him into the town's dark streets and squares. The captive departs. And the old man? The kiss burns within his heart, but the old man remains with his former idea. And you along with him too, Alyosha exclaimed sadly. Ivan laughed. Oh, Alyosha, why, you know it's nonsense. It's just an incoherent poem by an incoherent student who has never so much as put 2 lines of verse to paper. Why are you taking it so seriously? Surely you don't think that now I shall go straight there to the Jesuits in order to join the crowd of people who are correcting his great deed. Oh Lord, what do I care about that? I mean, I told you all I want to do is hold on until I'm 30 and then dash the cup to the floor. And the sticky leaf buds and the beloved tombs and the blue sky and the women you love. How are you going to live? What are you going to love them with? Alyosha exclaimed sadly. With a hell like that in your breast and your head, is it possible? No, of course you're going to join them. And if you don't, you'll kill yourself. You won't be able to endure. There is a power that can endure everything, Ivan said with a cold, ironic smile now. What power? The Karamazovian power. The power of Karamazovian baseness. You mean to drown in depravity, to crush the life from your soul in corruption? Is that it? And he says, possibly that too, but how will you escape? With what means will you escape? With your ideas, it's impossible. Again, the Karamazovian way. And then they end this whole entire encounter like this. Alyosha stared at him without saying anything. And Ivan responds, in leaving, brother, I had imagined that in all the world I have only you, Ivan says suddenly, with unexpected emotion. But now I see that in your heart there is no room for me, my dear hermit. I do not disown the formula, all things are lawful. But I mean, are you going to disown me because of it, eh? Alyosha rose, walked over to him, and without saying anything, kissed him quietly on the lips. And Ivan exclaims, literary thieving, suddenly passing into a kind of ecstasy. You stole that from my poem. But never mind, I thank you. Come on, Alyosha, let us go. It is time for you and for me. And then they make one final interaction, but that's how the whole entire encounter ends.
Yeah. It's remarkable to see this through the lens of Dostoyevsky, the man who lost his son tragically to illness. And he is brutally honest about the Ivan in his heart that he had to endure, that valley of doubt, the crucible of doubt that he passed through with his Hosanna. And it's just so powerful to look at this whole story through that lens of recognizing Dostoevsky looking at himself as a part of the whole of humanity, responsible for his suffering and enduring his suffering and yearning to take these easy, so to speak, ways out, and to even implement them, further them, to be one of the 100,000 leaders of the church that enforce this deceptive salvation upon humanity, that there might be unity through his own means. And yet the parallel of Alyosha and Christ sitting there listening, it imitates the way that we must sit with our suffering until the end, until it's had its say, and kiss it goodbye, powerfully, to leave that part of ourselves to die alone within itself, and not allow it to take power over our upward aiming spirit that we do have, we can nurture, and that we can continue to choose to live from.
Yeah. And even to, yeah, when you let it have its say, to still acknowledge that, like, this, you can't, that's not sustainable. These conclusions are not sustainable. Like, you will cave under them unless you find something to bow down to. And even still, you can do it with the prick conscious because you're too aware of. It's the whole thing. It's like even someone who's convinced that what they're convinced of is wrong, like they know how wrong it is, but they don't want to venture into the unknown, into the wilderness, into Eremos. But even as the Grand Inquisitor says, like, I too went there, and I decided that. So it's like even like
That's what I'm saying. Dostoevsky is that Inquisitor too, and
Yeah.
and he went there, and was deeply tempted by these temptations, the
Yeah.
offer of the devil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
Yes, very. Well, James, I'm sure there's more meat on this bone, but
Mhm.
I am plenty content to cut it off there. I'm very glad that we pursued this intuition, and I learned just so much from these stories in conversation with you. Thank you.
I do want to end on a note. Um, it's in Galatians chapter 2. Um, chapter 2, verse 20 to the end. It says, I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. In the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died needlessly. Some translations translate this passage, verse 20, life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. Um,
Mm.
I think it was actually Wayne Jacobson that pointed that out, and he loves me. In King James Version, it says faith of the Son of God. And so, just to correlate even that with the faith in humanity and what we've been talking about, to try to connect that thread here. Um, life I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. Um, whosoever shall believe, he died for you to have that freedom to choose. Yeah. I think that's a good note to end it on.
Absolutely, it
Invitation.
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you, James.
yeah, it's been real. Till next time.